that 0 to 3 age is a really big opportunity, right, to really get kids on the right track. And unfortunately, we know that most of the youth that we serve have suffered some sort of trauma or neglect during that age that really put them at a disadvantage in life. Some of the things that we could say that the babies need is interaction, touch. I think more importantly is stable relationships that they've missed out on, that they didn't have that safety net or that support system from early on. So that's how they view the world now, right? They have a trauma lens of what's going on around them because of what happened to them as children and the maltreatment that they suffered. Kids need self-esteem, right? When a kid learns how to use the potty, you're supposed to do a little potty dance and make them feel like they're a hero because they were able to use the restroom and not in the diaper. Communication, reading, constant stimulation, these are all things that babies need. And music and playtime. There are 4 parts that I think that are key structures for how the brain develops. This is kind of the sciencey part. There's the prefrontal cortex, the dorsolateral cortex, the anterior cingulate, and the amygdala. Does everybody know what the amygdala is for? No. The
Primitive.
Say that again?
Everything primitive. I mean, all our good primitive emotions
come from the amygdala. The amygdala, that is responsible for that flight or fight response. So when there's stressors in the environment, that amygdala activates, right? And it's communicating with the body. Should I flee in this situation or should I stay and fight? When that amygdala is activated, the prefrontal cortex turns off. And what the prefrontal cortex is responsible for is reasoning. It's responsible for reasoning and how you conflict resolution. It's responsible for error monitoring as far as navigating through a situation. And if that is turned off, the amygdala, which is either fight or flight, is what we usually see in the youth that we serve, because at a young age, the amygdala is programmed as far as when it should react and if it should turn on or off that prefrontal cortex.
Could I add something to
Yes.
that? In working with adolescents and trying to understand the brains, if you think about the amygdala, when we're born, that is the most active part of our brain as we're starting to develop that prefrontal cortex.
Right.
And so if we have trauma that's taking place in pre-verbal, the amygdala is pre-verbal, it stores recollection and it stores training. And
it stores wiring as well.
Correct. And it's almost like upgrading to a new computer. That data isn't necessarily accessible. Once we start having verbal language and we're more in our frontal cortex, the two don't necessarily communicate. So a child can't access those memories in the way we think of remembering something. But in our day-to-day interaction, if we trigger something that wakes that thing up, we'll get a trauma reaction that they absolutely cannot explain why they're behaving that way, why they're reacting with fight or flight, and they just look crazy.
And the prefrontal cortex, it grows and it strengthens over time with the right experiences. And if that child is always being put in a stressful situation where the amygdala is what overpowers and what's always being activated, that reasoning section of the brain doesn't really fully develop or even develops at a normal rate as other mainstream children would. So they're looking at brain sizes of children, how without even knowing their history or their past, it looks like somebody who's suffering Alzheimer's. So it's just biologically, maltreatment and abuse really takes a toll on the brain and how it develops. And it's not something that's easily erased or, I don't want to say curable, but something that's easily fixed or resolved. It takes a long time to even, if it's even possible, to really get that prefrontal cortex to develop how it should be. So when there are stressors in the environment, we know that adrenaline is released, right? Everybody's familiar with that adrenaline, that feeling, that jittery feeling if you have to like speak in front of a congregation or if you're being attacked by a bear, I don't know. So the adrenaline, it's what it serves, that hormone, it serves the purpose of really dilating your vessels, the blood vessels in your body so that oxygen gets to the brain and gets to your limbs and to get that extra burst of energy if you have to run or escape or fight or or flight from a situation. When adrenaline is released, so is cortisol, which is another stress hormone, and that allows for that quick response to happen at the same time. These hormones, they're usually quickly absorbed in the body because it's only supposed to be temporary. I mean, these hormones are usually released with sports activities if you play soccer or if you're in a stressful situation. But over time, if somebody is chronically exposed to stress, these levels never really go down. And we see that in adolescents and youth as ADD symptoms, depression, aggression, violent behavior, because they're always hyper vigilant. They're always in this state of fight or flight because the body hasn't learned to absorb those hormones quickly. I like to call the two hormones that are at the bottom the feel-good hormones, and that's dopamine and serotonin. Dopamine is key to learning. It's also involved in how people form positive relationships. So if they're basically like the pleasure centers of the brain. When something good is happening, those hormones are released. A lot of people, when they eat chocolate, that raises the levels of dopamine and serotonin. So you associate different experiences and triggers to these feel-good hormones. I always like to say that as service providers, we have to think about how we can be our kids' dopamine, right? And to be their serotonin. Yes?
You said that the ADHD was a direct result of, is that proven that that's always the case of ADHD exposure?
No, but it could be a factor of maybe there's a excess of that hormone being produced in the body that causes for those symptoms of attention deficit disorder and hyperactivity. Yes. So going through this slide, these are just some symptoms of what we would see as an excess of these hormones in the body. There's stunted social emotional development, poor self-image, poor self-esteem, a lot of low internal motivation, poor social skills. I'm sure we see a lot with these youth that a lot of them don't really have friends. Some of them just have associates, or sometimes it's hard for them to identify a best friend or somebody that they can count on. They're usually very untrusting of other people, obviously because of what they've experienced. Usually getting into serial relationships, there's promiscuity, and also poor choices. Now, there's this word called polyvictimization. I think it kind of is self-explanatory. A lot of these youth you see they're victims of multiple stressors. There's no safe place, really, right? Usually they're coming from a place where there's been family violence or child maltreatment, there's sibling assault or domestic violence. From dangerous communities, there's a lot of kids that have to walk to the bus stop, right? And there's bullies along the way or drug dealers. And that's usually because they're coming, mom is a single parent. They can't pick them up from school or whatever that might be. Sexual assault, peer victimization, a lot. Right now we were talking about there's cyberbullying, and that bullying has kind of taken on a new form. And there's also some things that are kind of ecological or environmental things, such as poverty, things that can't really be helped sometimes, the family adversity challenges that they have, unemployment, substance abuse, poor social skills. So youth usually are experiencing a lot of different trauma experiences all at once. It's not just one thing kind of operating on its own. It's usually like a Venn diagram of things that are going on. All right, so why would you say that word difficult, as far as saying youth are difficult, really isn't the party line that I like to use. I like to highlight that what we might consider behavior that's challenging to the youth, they don't see that as a problem. That behavior has been working for them. It's been getting their needs met for whatever reason. It's either getting more of something or less of something. Either they're distancing themselves from somebody or they're getting their needs met more of something. And these are some common labels that we hear describe some of the youth, such as manipulative, but these are some definitions that I think indicate what's really going on. If you say someone's manipulative, they might just have a fierce desire, right, to get their needs met, and they don't trust others to do it, so they get it done on their own. As far as lazy, sometimes kids don't do things because they don't want to be labeled as stupid. If I don't try at this test, or if I don't show up to school, no one, and let's say I do and I fail, I don't want to be labeled as stupid, so I won't even try, right? And it could be signs of depression and sadness. Stubbornness and defiantness, that's usually they're untrusting of adults. You know, they're living in the here and in the now, they're survivors. And it's also a response to anxiety associated with change. And aggression, it's reinforced through society. Like when kids are being aggressive or loud or violent, that's how they get attention. People are hearing them and focusing on them during those times. And it's an attempt to gain control of a situation. It's an attempt to be heard, right? It's often reinforced. So I want to talk about some ways to reach the youth that you're working with, kind of reframe their behavior. And it's not to condone what they're doing, but to really look at the strengths that these youth have. I like something that you said earlier about the youth that you work with. You said that they're high efficiency.
Oh, they're very, very good at in their FCAT scores and their grade point average.
Something about high potential, but from low income
Yes,
families,
exactly,
right?
exactly.
So even though they're coming from an environment that's not necessarily a good one, but they have very good potential. And reframing how we think about youth, I want us to really maximize on what their potential is, right? So if you have a youth that many would consider manipulative, again, talk to them as, Sarah, you're really good at getting your needs met. I want to listen to you. I want to find out what's going on with you and how I can help you, right? Same thing with being not motivated or lazy. Really tap into why they don't have that internal motivation. Maybe they're sad, maybe they're depressed, or very cautious to participate. Being stubborn, that person is very good at standing up for themselves and holding their ground and being steadfast at what they believe in. And this is just to reframe, their strengths and not just focusing on the negatives or what most of the world probably sees them as a troubled kid or a kid that's beyond fixing. So we know from earlier that the brain has triggers, right, as far as what hormones they release. Again, you want to be your kid's dopamine and their serotonin. Scientifically, it's been proven that serotonin and dopamine are released when people eat bananas and chocolate. Like in my meeting space with the girls, I always usually have some candy out or some trail mix even. Because youth, when they meet with you or when they interact with you, they might not ever remember what you told them, but they always remember how you made them feel. Years from now, me at the age of 27, I'll never forget a counselor. Every time I went into her office, I always felt relaxed. I always felt comfortable. And thinking back on it, I know it's because she really intentionally staged her office space. There was certain types of lighting. She had these plugins of vanilla and lavender, which also raises serotonin and dopamine levels in the body. Just without even me knowing it, I'm feeling completely at ease speaking with her. And that's something that we can create in our office space. You create and intentionally stage your space that you feel protected, that they have a safe space when they're speaking with you. And to also be a supportive area. The things that you put up in your office, the encouraging posters, offer the youth water, candy, snacks, praise them anytime that they do something well. There's a pat on the back, whatever it might be. And also making them feel welcome. Hi, how are you doing? And really being genuine and sincere with your interactions with them. So this last slide is just really some techniques about using verbal prompts. And it's not bad to provide incentives. Sometimes I kind of think of it as bribery, but if you're with your youth and you say, if you really ace that test that you have next week, let's go out for lunch or something. And that's creating a relationship with the youth, which I think is that stable relationship that maybe many of them never really experience. And that makes all the difference. Really, again, they remember how you made them feel, not so much about what you said to them.
you.